Hello, this is Mike Fauché, and today I want to do a short video on Cat 6 and Cat 7 cables. As always, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe and hit that notification icon so you'll be notified of some future content when it comes out. So today I want to go through the differences between Cat 6 and Cat 7, because I know as 10 gigabit becomes more and more popular, with something that we need to be concerned about, at least in understanding what the differences are and when possibly you should or shouldn't use one or the other. So I'm going to go through actually terminating the cables, but I also want to describe briefly what the difference is. So if we look at these two cables, you'll notice that this one here is much thinner. This is the standard Cat 6 cable that's probably that you've probably run in your house, or that you've bought patch cords for, or something like that. And the one next to it is the Cat 7 cable. Now this is a solid strand cable, so it's the same type that you pull through your walls, not necessarily the type that you would buy if you bought a patch cable. The patch cables are actually much thinner wire, and they're multi-stranded, so they can remain flexible. This stuff here is pretty stiff, but this is basically what would be run through your walls to establish an Ethernet connection to a room. So let's briefly talk about the differences. So if I look at the Cat 6 cable, all of those strands are twisted, and then there's a rubber, in this particular cable anyway, there's a rubber insert that keeps the pairs kind of twisted throughout the actual cable to minimize crosstalk. So there's, other than the wires and the insert, the rubber insert, which you usually cut off, there's really nothing else in this cable. In contrast, if we look at the Cat 7 cable, we'll see a couple differences. Number one, there is a braid around the wire, and that's used to shield the wire all the way through. So as you'll see when we put this together, these connectors here are actually metal, so you'll see how they actually are basically attached to this wire. The other thing you'll notice here is on the Cat 7 is, besides the shield, is that you have the individual pairs are actually wrapped in foil. They're in a metallic foil, so to add further shielding. So you basically have two layers of shielding in Cat 7 that really isolates it from noise, RF, crosstalk. So you've got a really strong cable that's more important as you get into longer runs, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. So now that you can kind of see how the wire's kind of made up, let's actually terminate the wire with two types of terminations. There's this one here, which is a keystone type. This is the type you basically put on your wall plate. If you're going to actually run wires into your wall, this is typically what you either put on a panel, a patch panel, or into a keystone plate that you install on your wall. Notice that these are all metal too, and that's in essence for the grounding. And then this connector is used for standard RJ45 patch. Uses a plastic insert and a much larger boot to compensate for the additional thickness of the cable. So what I want to do now is actually terminate two different kinds of the two ends, so you can kind of see how it works and how it's done. And it's a little bit more challenging terminating Cat 7 cables. Okay, so let's get started on how to terminate this with the RJ45 cable. So very first thing you're going to want to do, for obvious reasons, is pre-insert the boot, just because it's a lot easier to do it at this time. So once the boot's pre-inserted, our next step is to actually strip the cable. So we use one of these jacket strippers. What I usually do is I usually strip it at least a couple inches, because I like to have the extra room to work with. There are other people that do it different ways. Everybody has a technique that they prefer. For me, this works better, because as we insert this little plastic insert, I like to have the extra length of the wire to work with. So let's go ahead and strip that jacket. Okay, the very first thing we're going to do is take this braid and actually pull it back, and we're going to trim it to be about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. And the reason we're going to do this is because we're going to use this foil tape to actually wrap around the shielding to provide better contact to the connector, and you'll see what that means a little bit later, because our idea is to actually use the shielding and make sure it's properly grounded. So let's start by trimming this up. So we're just gonna separate this out here. Okay, so we've actually separated this out, and you can trim this up as as nicely as you want. It probably doesn't matter much, but it looks a lot nicer when it's trimmed up, and you add the foil tape. Okay, so now that we've got this trimmed, one more. We're now going to use this foil tape and actually put the tape around the shielding. Now the adhesive on this copper tape is actually conductive, so there we go. So this provides a kind of a nice, it ties the shielding together, so when we clamp on the connector, it'll make better contact. And the next thing we're going to do is actually pull these 4 strands apart, or 4 pairs apart, and pull off the foil. Now the foil is just wrapped on there, so you can usually just grab it and pull it away. So we're going to do that here. And you don't want to pull it all the way down so that it's all the way to the base, and then we're going to go ahead and cut that off so it's not in our way. Now some people actually pull the foil down over the shielding and tape the whole thing, but that's not all that necessary. If you prefer to do it that way, that's okay. To me it's not necessary, since the foil and the shielding are already grounded together inside the cable. So 2 more. As you can see, it takes a little more time to terminate Cat 7 than it does to terminate Cat 6. Okay, so now we've got our wires exposed. The next part is done differently depending on who you talk to. The way that I prefer to do it is I want to untwist the wires sort of in a star pattern. And the reason I do that is because on the Cat 7 you no longer have the colored stripe on the white wire. For manufacturing reasons, they're not able to actually add the color stripe to the white wire. All they can do is solid. So basically all the Cat 7 has is a solid white wire. So if you don't keep these apart and they get intermixed, you're going to have a problem wiring it up. So what I usually do is I actually separate them in pairs like this, and I want to make sure they're nice and straight, so I'm going to pull it, and I leave them together again in sort of a star pattern, and this will help me when I actually go to wire them up through the connector. So, and you'll see what that means here in just a minute. Let's get these nice and straight, and okay, one more. Okay, so there's my 4 pairs in a star pattern. And again, I've kept all of these together so I know that this is white wire belongs with this orange and so on. The next step is to use this little clear piece, which we're going to use to help guide the wires and keep them in the order that we want as we insert them into this connector. So there are different pinout configurations, and I'll add a link to the different options, but basically there are 2 types of wiring diagrams. There's a 568A and a 568B. The standard in the US is to use B, so I would suggest using that. Okay, so we're going to wire up, assuming we're going to use B here, and what we're going to do here, the very first thing we're going to do is to grab this little plastic insert, which has almost a sawtooth pattern on it, and we're going to push the first 2 wires through, which is the brown and the white brown, or white. So the next one to go in is actually the green wire, so we'll grab the green wire and push that through. And after the green we have a white blue, so we'll grab the white pair from the blue pair, or the white wire from the blue pair, push that in, and then the blue, so we'll push that in. And then we'll grab the white wire from the green pair that we had left behind. So we'll push that in, and that leaves us first the orange wire. So let's push that through. And lastly, the white wire from the orange pair, and push that through. So now what we've done is actually, we're going to flatten this out here a little bit. Basically we've added this guide that allows us to keep the wires kind of together so they can be inserted into the connector properly. So just want to get this nice and flat so it'll make the job a little easier. And we're going to push this down a little further. There. And the idea here is that you want the very end of the clip to be flush with the top, and then you want the base to be just clearing the foil here. So this would be just about perfect here. So with this plastic clip and the wires perfectly straight, what we're going to want to do is actually trim this up. So what we've got here is all the wires in line, ready to be inserted into the connector. So the idea is to push this in, the plastic part will insert into the top here, and as you push the wires further, they're actually guided into the individual slots so they can be crimped. So basically we're going to go in and carefully push this in, and we're going to go ahead and just kind of wiggle it back and forth so that the wires are pushed in. Now what we want to see is the tip of the wires on the way all the way to the top here, and you should be able to see as you look around the connector whether or not they're actually connected or not, because you want them to actually push all the way to the top. Once you verify that it's actually inserted correctly, and you're going to grab your crimper, and any crimper that works with RJ45 should work. Some of the crimpers actually take care of this bottom piece here that we have, which is right here. We're going to do this by hand, but some of the crimpers do crimp this at the same time, which makes it nice. I don't have to have one. So what we're going to do here is actually insert, crimp this, and it should now be nice and snug. And then we're going to finish it off by taking this one piece here and actually crimping it around the foil that we have here. So let's do that. And you kind of have to work it a little bit. And what I do is I grab a pair of needle nose and actually do this by hand. A little bit more trouble if you're doing it by hand, but it does work. Don't press it too hard. Just make sure that it's wrapped carefully around it and it's making good contact and supporting the wire. That's all you got to do. And that's it. Now we're going to push our boot up. And there we have it. So we now have our wire's been terminated. So now we're ready to actually terminate the other side. And I'm going to show you how to terminate into this keystone. Now this one we're going to start the same way. I went ahead and pre-stripped this so that you don't have to sit through the entire unwrapping of the foil process. But basically it's exactly the same as you did on the other side. The only difference is now we're going to use this little insert in tool. Now this happens to be polarized here. So this, if we open this up here, this only fits one direction. There. It only goes this way. So this rounded piece is actually following the arrow here. It can only go on one way, so it's not a huge problem, but you just need to be aware of that when you're trying to put it in at the end. Now these are a lot easier than the RJ45 side. So if you'll notice closely that these have color codes on the side. Now there's two types. There's an A and a B, just like the RJ45 side. So we want to make sure that we're using the B. And the B is actually the bottom row there, or the top of the device. So from here we're going to actually, there's a divider in the center here. So if we look at, there's green and brown. So we're going to take the green and brown and actually insert them onto this side, which will leave the blue and the orange for the other side. So what we've got here, if we look closely, on the B side we have green and white green, so that's over here. Over here we have blue, which is over here. And then on the other side we have brown and we have our orange. So there we have it. That's how it's going to end up getting wired. So to do this, we're going to want to push this down as far as it can go, because these don't have the it's a little tougher to wrap around the foil with these. So we'll get this worked in as low as possible, like this, so that when it's closed up, the metal piece will actually make contact with the foil. So now that we've got this set up, let's go ahead and start wiring this thing up. So the first thing we're going to do is untwist the white and brown wire, and we're going to take and slide that into the notch, just like that. Pretty easy. And then we're going to take the next pair, which is the orange and white, and we're going to take the orange solid and the white for the orange pair and slide it in here. So you want to make sure it gets pushed down so that it gets in the slot there. Sometimes you have to push it down with your fingernail. And there we have it. So now let's do the other side. And we'll do the green and the white. Again, make sure they get pushed down. Makes it easier for you later. And the last one, which is the blue. So we'll push that down and push that down. So again, it's pretty straightforward. These just kind of slide right in. I'm just going to push them down just a little bit just so that they're locked in there. And then we're going to trim this extra wire off. So once they're actually inserted, we're just going to trim these off flush. So now we've got the so basically we've inserted all our wires. We're now ready to actually put it on the keystone. So let's go ahead and do that. This should just slide right in like this. You're going to push it in just a little bit, and then when you close this up, it's actually going to lock it into place. Kind of like that. You might need a pair of pliers to give it that last click. There you go. I don't know if you heard that click or not, but that basically locked that thing in. Now, there's the contact through the foil is actually made through the outer case. There's a tie wrap that comes with these. I'm not going to go ahead and put that on because I'm going to reuse this connector. But you basically tie the tie wrap around, tie it tight. That provides support and that provides contact as well. Mostly in the area of support. So now we're ready to actually test this out and see if we've done a good job wiring this up. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take there's a module that fits onto the end of this that provides the connections, it provides a beep. So we're going to take this and actually insert it into the keystone. And then we're going to take our wire and insert it into the main. Now this is kind of hard to see because of the display, but the unit's beeping on us now. So we're going to go ahead and hit wire map. And as you can see, or if you can see, it's tested the cable. It's given us a pass, telling us our cable's good. We're now ready to go. And that's all there is to it. So what we've accomplished today is to actually terminate two different types of connections, both a keystone for wall plates, patch panels, and the actual RJ45 cable. So I hope that you found that useful. It's, obviously the best approach is to when you are wiring up your house is to put the best kind of cable you can or possibly can afford. The actual raw cable is dropping in price, so it's actually not too bad. It's still a little bit more money than Cat 6. The connectors, however, are quite a bit more, so you're going to have to pay a little bit more for connectors. But if you are doing it to wire in your house, you might as well be ready for the future. And as always, these cables are backwards compatible, so if I install Cat 7, it'll work fine with even really old devices. So I hope you found this useful, and as always, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Hit your notifications, hit the notifications icon so you'll be notified of the new content. And if you like this video, throw it a like. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.